How's it going, guys? Fireball Jack here, back again to make one new video for you, especially for you new tank players. So, today's video, how to do your job right as a Vanguard for dummies. Okay, now, something very important, this video is not just for beginners, but it's also for people who are trying to rank up. I recently just hit Celestial, and I'm kind of in that bridge, so take it from someone who's played tank not only in Marvel Rivals, but also Overwatch. I played Overwatch. I mainly was a Reinhardt main, but I also did play all the other tanks. And let me just help you become a slightly better tank, because while your job as a tank is to make space and protect, that can be a little bit different for each character and how they go around doing their job, because there's not just one right way to do your job. Okay? Let's start it off. So, put me on the background. Hope you enjoy. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. I see all the comments. I read all my comments. And I'll try to respond. Anyways, here is my graph. Now, as you can see, there are three main circles. We have dive, poke, and control. Let me go through what each kind of means, and then we'll go into a little bit more depth. So, dive. Dive is specifically tanks who are going into the backline. The goal of a dive tank is to make a lot of noise very fast without dying. Now, it's important that you don't die. Okay, if you dive in and die, it does not matter. Okay? The goal is to get into the backline, make tons of crazy space, maybe even get a kill or two, and dip back out. That is how you do it. Aggression is the name of the game. Next is poke. Poke is where you're kind of in the back, constantly throwing out projectiles or damage, or just kind of think of it like a cannon in a way. Alright? You're far away, you're constantly shooting decent damage things, and you're just trying to just keep anyone away from you, okay? You're poking at them. Think of it in a way as you're killing someone with 100 paper cuts, or whatever that might be, okay? Next is control. Now, control is dive, but slightly different, or I like to call it more dive, but the complete opposite. While dive is very, very, very aggressive, control is not as aggressive. Control is about slowly gaining distance, slowly gaining space. And I'll go into it a little bit more detail here, but for right now, again, dive is aggression, constantly jumping into the backline. Poke is where you're constantly poking at the enemy and at a far away distance, making lots of damage from far away. And control is slowly pushing the line up, okay? Trying to make it harder for the enemy team to invade your space. Let's get into it. So let's take our first one. Now, as you can see in my little graph here that I made, these placements are important. They're not just randomly thrown around. These placements, such as, let's start with Venom. Venom is all the way into dive. He's far away from control or poke. He is specifically a dive tank. You can be in the front line. You can do other tank things, but Venom's main goal is to be in the backline harassing. Okay? Now, I'm not the best Venom main out there, but I can tell from experience and from what I've seen, it's very important that you climb up a wall, slam down into the backline, start making some chaos. Once you're about to die, pop your shield and get out of there. Okay? Venom is hard dive. The whole goal of him is to just get into the backline, try and make a kill, because remember, if you're playing Venom here and you land on both supports, the supports now have to turn their attention away from you, or away from their tanks, towards you. And now they're dealing with you. They're no longer healing their DPS. They're no longer healing their own tanks. It completely messes up their entire game plan. Alright? Let's take someone like Hulk, who's a little bit different. Okay? Hulk is closer to the poke side. Now, why is that? It's specifically because Hulk has the ability to throw out projectiles. Okay? He's still a dive tank. He's not even close or in the realm of a poke tank, but he is closer than Venom because he has the ability to throw a clap every once in a while, the ability to exile someone, alright, at range. You could debate if that's more control. I would say kinda. I don't know exactly. Hulk is a really hard one because he's a main tank. Even though he has similar things to Venom, Venom is not a main tank. Venom is a dive tank. Alright, and Hulk's game plan is kind of the same thing, except he's not always needing to dive. It's better for him to dive, and the more he dives, the more chaos he creates, but he can always jump back and shield his teammates from an ultimate. He can do anything, really. He's got the ability for a lot of things. And then Captain America. Captain America is a little bit more on the control side, in my opinion, for a few key factors. He has the ability to defend himself, shield himself, or shield his friends, as well as he has the ability for his ultimate to save and kind of create a walkway or at least an area of survivability. That's why I would put Cap more closer to the control side, because his ultimate is inherently just another support ult. It's not as strong as a regular support ult, but we've all been there where you're trying to kill a Cap and he pops his ultimate and he can do this for the rest of the day. But anyways, quick recap. Venom is a full dive tank, Hulk is a full dive tank, and Cap are a full dive tanks. They're all dive tanks, but they play a little bit differently. Just slightly differently, but they're still jumping into the backline. They're still making chaos. Aggression is the name of the game for them. Now if we go on to poke tanks. Now you see here, poke tanks. We don't have any main poke tanks. In my opinion, poke tanks don't exist yet. Okay? Poke tanks are tanks that can do really good damage from far away. Okay? I'm not talking 25 meters, so Magneto, while close, not really. Far away, consistent, good damage. Alright? We don't really have that yet. When you're thinking of a poke character, think of characters like Hawkeye, Black Widow, Hela, and other characters along that line. That would be considered a poke type of character, because they're poking you from a distance. Again, it's that whole idea of taking you out with 1,000 paper cuts. Alright? Now, of course, some of those paper cuts are going to hit a whole lot harder, right? We've all been there where you get one shot by Hawkeye compared to Black Widow or something like that. But again, you're still getting shot from farther away or from a safer distance. Okay? We'll talk about Penny here next because she's in the middle of control and poke. But I believe Penny has more aspects of control than poke, but still has some poke elements. So one, the ability to throw her mines at a decent distance is always strong. The ability to stun people with her web is always very strong as well. You could consider that control, but you could also be using that in the poke, right? If someone's trying to get close to you, you can just keep throwing your stun at them. Even if it's just half a second stun, that stun is still a stun, right? They still have nothing they can really do to stop that stun unless they have some type of barrier. She also has the ability to shoot, basically infinite. She never needs to stop shooting, really, which allows her to do damage from far away. Think kind of like D.Va in a way, which is always a really good thing. That tends to be a good example of poke characters in some games. But it could also be a controller, a diver. It kind of depends on the kit of the character. But I would say Penny right now is the closest thing we have to a poke tank. And it's just because her range is farther than most of the other tanks. She's one of few tanks that do not have, that's not a melee tank. Now let's get into Control. Like I said, Control's entire thing is slowly taking space, little by little. If Dive is full aggression, Control, like I said, is slowly taking and making it harder for the enemy. You're kind of coursing your enemy to go in a different way or play slightly differently. Let me explain. Magneto. Now, Magneto does have the ability to be a poke tank, but I don't put him in a poke tank. Mainly because it depends if he has the team up or not. If Magneto has his team up with Wanda, then he kind of becomes a poke tank because every couple seconds when his ability is up, he can throw super high damage sword slashes at the enemy team. And they're infinite range. That would classify him as a poke tank. He also has Mag Cannon. He can throw out an infinite range projectile that pushes people backwards. That's a great example of what poke tanking is. That's why he's a little bit closer to the poke. But without that team up, his range is very close. While it's still not super close, and it's not melee, it still relies on that close to medium range type of damage. And if you need another example of what Control might be, think of it as a brick wall. Okay? Next, Groot. Now, Groot, in my opinion, is the best tank in the game. Now, it is a bias. I do play the Thing. I love the Thing. But Groot is so good at Control. He can make a choke point even harder to deal with just with his walls. If Groot doesn't want you going one way, he can put up walls that way and force you into a different scenario. He can force you to take weird team fights. There is never a point where if you're playing Control, you should not be running Groot. Okay? Thor. Now, Thor's weird, because Thor kind of does everything in a way similar to Hulk. But I have him in Control for a few reasons. Mainly it's because Thor's game plan tends to be stopping people from moving forward. What do I mean by this? He has the ability to shove people away. Usually it's into his team or away from his team. He has the ability to slow them down and then just burst them to death with his with his Awakening Ruin. But he also has, some meaty combos. His melee throw melee is a really good way to do a quick burst, high burst damage. I would tend to put him more in the Control line. He could also go Dive. Thor's weird. In my opinion, I feel like Thor could go into Control mainly, or into where Thing is right now, where it's in the mix of Dive and the mix of Control. But I'll explain why I have Thing in the middle, while I have Thor right here. Thor's ultimate is really good at denying people from coming forward. Remember, I don't know if you've seen a lot of good Thor ults. They tend to use it when they're desperate. But if done correctly, Thor can do lots of damage and kind of be a brick wall you can't even get close to, because he'll burst you down if you try to fight him one-on-one. Trying to pick a fight with Thor is a great way to die really early if he's really good. And if you're another character who can get pushed around, you're going to feel like you're constantly walking forward, getting shoved back. Walking forward, getting shoved back. One step forward, 3 steps back. And that's how Thor really can control the pace or control certain fights, which makes it really strong for him. And now let's go into my main. The Thing. Now, why do I have the Thing in the middle of Dive and Control? Most people would put Thing in Control, and I would say yes. I do agree. There are most times where Thing is a Control tank. He is someone who's going to help his team and weather the storm. Control is a very weather the storm type of thing. Okay? It's a team where you can kind of, if you've ever played Overwatch, think of it like a brawl comp. Okay? You're kind of this ball that keeps moving slowly forward. Okay? And it's really hard to kill anyone in that ball, but once you slowly make your way up and consume someone, they kind of die really early. Right? Or they just can't keep up with it. Regardless, let me explain. The Thing, his team-up ability and just the way you can play him is not just a control. If you've seen some of my guides, yes, I do tend to play more control-like because that's his main thing. You can dive with him. Specifically, if you have a teammate that's flanking, someone like a Magic, someone like an Iron Fist, or Black Panther, there's a lot of times that I will tell my other tank, hey, can you help? Can you protect the back line? I'm going to roll up with my flanker because I can keep giving damage resistance to my flanker and making that flank really hard, making that flanker really hard to die, and having a tank being able to stop your abilities allows the thing to effectively help the dive even stronger, as well as the fact that you should not just be using his jump to jump away. Try using your jump to jump in as well. You see Doctor Strange floating in the air above you or something like that, or maybe you see Hulk jumping in, jump with him. Again, I told you about his team up. If you have Wolverine, you throw Wolverine and you fly with him. And you now have this really high damaging to both tanks and regular characters coming at you at full speed. This allows what I believe kind of this mix. I still would put Thing more in control than dive, but with the ability to dash in with tons of health and kind of stop people or keep jumping in and out of stuff, it allows the Thing to control and dive. Again, this is why Thor is an issue, because Thor can also dive in. I just think Thor is best when he's controlling a situation, controlling certain aspects, when the Thing can be a little bit more reckless because of the health and just because of the ability to, like, the way he plays, the damage resistance he can constantly be producing. Now, finally, probably one of the best tanks in the game. You see him basically in every match. Not Magneto, excuse me. Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is the only character that I believe is actually in the middle of everything. He can poke pretty decently. It's not great. The magic does tend to fizzle out at a similar range to Magneto's. But his shield allows him to play a very good poke style. He can just put his shield up and the rest of his team can poke because there's a huge shield and you can't really fight against that shield unless you try to break it, right? But again, if he's playing in a poke comp, they're kind of, constantly shooting at you, right? Or if it's a control, which poke tends to be control or brawl tanks, that any meaningful damage that the control can even try to throw out, because it tends to be a lot more, again, a ball of death, is going to get beat out by the constant barrage, and any meaningful damage gets stopped by that shield. He also has the ability to dive. Well, it's not very good compared to something like a Hulk jump. His ability to fly in the air and control all of that space and kind of just fall in is huge. His ability to teleport can win games. You might not consider it a dive, but to me, I consider Strange Portals as a dive mechanic. Alright? If you can get you or your whole team into the back line in the blink of an eye, that's basically a dive. Now, it's on a heavy cooldown, which makes sense. It's your whole team and not just you. But I still consider that as a dive. And he also has the ability to control. Mainly it just becomes to the fact that his ultimate is very strong. Also, his magic blast is also really strong. It's AoE. Anyone gets too close to Doctor Strange, he can get wiped out pretty fast. And while it's not as good as something like Thor or as good as Groot, who can kind of control that, remember, as Doctor Strange, if you put a shield up and Luna's in front of you doing her, her whole music video, anyone behind your shield, if that's an enemy, is not getting healed, is not getting the buff or anything that she might be putting out. Same goes for Mantis. Remember, it's kind of like hard cover. Remember when I said about the Thing, if you saw my video, how his ultimate doesn't gets stopped at full cover? Well, for healing stuff like Mantis, like Luna Snow, you put that shield up and it blocks the healing. It blocks the damage buff. It blocks anything. It doesn't exist. It doesn't work. Anyways, hopefully, I hope you learned something a little bit. So, again, let me just do a quick conclusion here. When you're playing a dive character, your goal is to constantly put the aggression on. Smart. Not just jumping in and dying. If you jump in and die as a dive tank, you're not doing your job. Okay? You're supposed to jump in, make a little bit of space, maybe get a kill, but that's not the goal. You're not trying to kill anyone. You're just trying to take the attention of the healers off their own tanks. If you're in a poke comp, even though there is no real poke tank at the moment, your goal is to protect your team who might be trying to poke the enemy out. Again, they're throwing a ton of stuff and slowly trying to whittle them down. Okay? Your goal is to stop anyone who is slowly making space towards you. And finally, if you're a control tank, your goal is to create scenarios where the enemy team does not have a favorable positioning. Okay? You are trying to put up walls to block ways to go. You're trying to make choke points even harder to go through. You are becoming the brick wall that you're supposed to as a team. So, hopefully you learned something, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Like I said, I will gladly talk a little bit more. And this list can always change because team-ups are changing. The way the meta shifts can change. Tons of aspects can change. But hopefully you now know how to do your job right as a Vanguard. If you're a dive tank, try not to play control. Because if you're playing someone like Captain America trying to control space, it's not going to be very easy compared to someone like Magneto. If you're playing Venom trying to poke, well, I don't want to be mean, but it's not going to work. Your kit is not made to poke someone out. If you're playing the Thing, you're not going to poke anyone. You don't have any long range. You have your melee, and that's it. So, hopefully, you know a little bit more. Hopefully, you kind of understand how to play your role, not only to make space and protect, but how do you actually get the most value? And hopefully this kind of shows you. Feel free to come back to this video if you ever need to think about it, right? But if you have any questions, like I said, for the third time now, feel free to ask and have a great day. Bye-bye.